Yeah, because then it's not political. I mean,
Yes,
like, you look at, like, the TV series Shogun, right?
yes,
The newer version,
beautiful.
right?
Yeah,
It it it's not it wasn't politically motivated at all. It was just
it was
pure
just, yeah,
authentic storytelling, yeah.
correct.
In the distant future, vampires rule the night, but their numbers are dwindling. One podcast is unlike all the others, half human, half vampire. This is Lefty Speaks, the official podcast for Vampire Hunter D.
Brandon,
Yeah.
you're going to say something.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things that we have had that I can talk about behind the scenes, we had a document that we would reference,
Hmm.
and that document allowed us, even when we found ourselves getting astray, to snap
Yeah,
right back
correct.
into the right track. Now,
Yeah,
I've worked on several adaptations in my time.
yeah,
This was the only one that had a document like that that was accessible to the entire staff.
yeah,
And obviously it was covered in our NDA, but the fact that we had access to it and the directors also had access to it and the
yeah,
storyboard artists had access to it, that made it so much easier to stay on track. And also having several graphic novels done
hmm,
that we were able to look at, like 2 had been released, I believe, but then 3
yeah,
and 4 were in
yeah,
development production,
yeah,
right? Having access to that made it easier for us to round out our season, and the one thing we didn't have to worry about was something that happened to one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Akira, or Akira, however you really pronounce it,
hmm,
where Otomo wasn't even done, and he had to make a movie. So you basically have the first third of the first book and the back end of the fifth book. The fifth book wasn't even done, and he made that into a film. We couldn't work that way.
yeah,
So it was great having a body of work to reference with a beginning, middle, and end, even though it was still a living series. So
hmm,
that's something that I feel needs to be understood by people who want to work in adaptation. Make sure somebody creates a world document
yes,
with pictures, with definitions,
yes,
with
yes,
real photo references.
yes,
That'll help out in a lot of ways.
absolutely.
It's kind of like one of the things I love in when board game designers do it is that on the back of the rule book is a quick reference guide or a quick reference card
Mm-hmm,
so that if you're like, oh, what was this? I don't remember it exactly.
mm-hmm,
Okay, this symbol means this, and you're
mm-hmm,
not stuck trying to flip through the book.
correct. Yeah,
To me, that's having things like that
Yep.
for quick, just visual. Okay, I've cleared the confusion.
mm-hmm,
I'm not wasting a ton of time. Like, what page was this on?
yeah,
Yeah, the oh,
yeah,
I
and
love I love hearing what you guys have done. It's just so much is done well.
yeah. I mean, again, like I think there's so many other people that are involved. That's, I mean, if we had to mention, we had teams, I think, on every continent
Yep.
except Australia and Antarctica. I think that's a continent, right? Yeah, I think
Yes,
Well, yeah,
it is
yeah,
right. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
still there.
yeah, but yeah, like literally, we obviously studio in Korea. You had artists in Argentina, Nigeria, Lagos. You had producers in Paris. Obviously us here, like LA, New York, Atlanta, me being here in DC, producers in Canada, like artists in Canada, like literally just spread across. So all of this is a massive team effort. So and it would be remiss if we didn't mention just the sheer amount of manpower and also alignment on vision, because that's another thing, right? And I think this is something very important because and Brandon can co-sign this. This started in the writers' room. Like we aside from I think Brandon and I, right? Like a lot of us were working together for the first time because Brandon and I, we had worked during the development phase, like when he was working on the script. But like you said, a lot of times you just don't know how it's going to mesh. But this is one thing that I always I credit to Brandon, because Brandon, and it's one of the hardest thing to do for anybody. I don't care who you are. Ego, right? Leaving your ego at the door. A lot of people say it, but it's hard to do. And I'm going to talk from a personal experience as somebody who created the world. Like I had to also take a step back with my ego and allow other people to bring themselves into the world of Iyanu and express themselves into the world of Iyanu. And a lot of times, I think one of the traps that creators fall into is being gatekeepers, right? Especially when it comes to cultural references, right? Like, and it's okay to want to preserve the culture, right? But sometimes you have to give people space to express themselves and then say, okay, how about we take it back a little bit because of this or because of that, right? Like, so to me, and again, this is why I credit Brandon, like, because he said that he was talking about coming in and saying that from day one, that there's nothing that cannot be resolved by having a mature conversation. And I cannot tell you how far that went for every single one of us, because that just set the tone for us, because we had this open policy where it's like, are we always going to agree? No. But everybody needs to feel the confidence to be able to raise their hand and say, I think there's a better way to do this. And for us to actually have a conversation. Because you have to understand, from Brandon's perspective, coming in to lead the writer's room, you have the creator and producer there, and you also have, a book that's, has culture that you're not familiar with, right? That's already it's already a hard thing to maneuver. But where I give Brandon credit for is that he's the master at being able to simultaneously drop his ego, but at the same time remain in charge in a way where it's like we have a process and we have a map that we're following, and this is the direction that we're going. It's a very hard line a very tightrope to walk, but he walks it brilliantly. And like I said, I think the scripts were the foundation, because you could tell that we put everything into the scripts. And I think that's what sort of galvanized all the other departments.
Oh yeah.
As well, taking inspiration from just how well the scripts were put together.
Well, you definitely seems you created the perfect environment.
Yes.
And that, I mean, I think that, I mean, we've talked about that on previous podcasts, that how important it is to set that tone and create the environment, because then everyone is free to actually be the best they can be and bring the best they have to present
Yeah.
to the project.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's was something I've heard, from people, relationship experts, counselors, both for, like friendships, work relationships, romantic relationships, is you have to both, everybody has to be willing to fight fair.
Correct. Yeah.
It's, what was the saying? Be somebody who's willing to be persuaded.
I love that.
You're not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've heard that in marriage counseling once or twice. So,
yeah. I mean, we all have to be, we all have to be able to be vulnerable, right? I mean, that if you don't trust, if you don't have that environment in which you can be vulnerable creatively, it destroys good writing, it destroys art, it destroys ideas, and then people put themselves in this little box. Because they're afraid to be vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I love the analogy, because honestly, a lot of times people don't necessarily understand that, a lot of relationships are similar, right? Like I've been married for 7.5 years now, and there's things that I've learned in marriage that I had to bring to my working relationships, right? Because like you said, like, I think the part about being willing to be persuaded, I think that you can also say that you have to have a mindset, no matter where you stand in the ladder, you are not always going to be right. You can't always be right, no matter who you are. And I think just leaving that open in every conversation and being willing to always ask the question, well, could I be wrong? You may not be wrong, but to be able to ask yourself that question, could I be on the wrong side of this discussion, I think is also something that can be very, very helpful, because there are situations that I've been in where I felt like the person I was either reporting to or working with always felt like they had the right answer. And there was nothing that you could do. Literally, it's like you could have a conversation that would go around in a circle and always end up in, well, I'm right. Right. So, and to me, is just, I think that's a dead on arrival type of mentality in a collaborative space.
Yeah, there's a
I
big
think that's how
difference.
you get
Yeah.
so many of the disasters we hear about in, business policy
Yeah.
just across history.
Yeah.
It's somebody who, it's my way or the highway, and if all you have are yes men, you
Correct.
Yeah.
get what you deserve.
Yeah.
But there's a big difference between listening for rebuttal and listening to learn,
Yes.
and I feel like we never really had a rebuttal culture, is what I call it. Just like, what we see in the political discourse these days is everything's rebuttal. What if, what about, blah, blah, blah. But we were all listening to learn. And I think that's another way that it flowed. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of, the adaptation process, I mean, I wouldn't say it was perfect, but it went smoother than anything I'd worked on in a very, very, very long time, and I hope that when people watch this episode in the Discord, they might ask us some questions. We can do like an AMA type of thing where people can just ask us about stuff and we can, flow from this conversation. Because I think, you know, every writer out there should learn the skill of adaptation. I mean, obviously, you need to create your own material, but being able to work on someone else's project, maintain their voice and maintain your voice, create something good, that goes a long way, And I feel that as of now, we have episode 5 up, and a lot of what we are building is starting to really show in episode 5.
Yeah.
So I really recommend that folks go out and buy the graphic novels, and then one of the things I would do is literally, go through the graphic novel and then watch the show, or watch the show and go through the graphic novel, see what you like.
Well, that's my plan.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
first of all, the graphic novels are absolutely beautiful. I'm not just saying that. I mean, you can see it for yourself. I mean, anyone can see it, I might be subjective, but I think it's absolutely beautiful, right? And you could see as an exercise, as a writer or a fan, what we left out and what we kept. And you'll notice that it's pretty close to the original. It's not quite the same, but because of the way it was paced, and this is something that's really, really rare for me, is to see a graphic novel paced so well that it's not breaking your neck to turn it into a teleplay or a screenplay. It was expertly paced, and I think that goes back to the creators, and that's what made it, I think, also easy, because it's like what he created is really on the screen.
Yeah,
it's there. It really is there.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of things where I said, we can't do that. Because here's the other thing. We didn't get into, like, I know we're running out of time, but we didn't talk about, like, time is money, in animation. Like, how many people are speaking on the screen at one time? How many people are standing around at one time?
Crowd shots.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few times I remember conversations where we discussed where people will end up at. And I said, well, we can't, it's probably not a good idea to put that. And, like, one of the arguments I always had in my own head is, if we do this, we have to create an asset. We don't have that asset, so we're not doing that. And that's something that's very, very important for animation. I always go back to, I forgot which anime it was. It may have been The Irresponsible Captain Tyler. I think it was that. Came out years ago. And in that show, they had a 70s parody giant robot anime that one of the characters loved to watch, right? And somebody came up to him and said, dude, why are you watching that? This is so dumb. Like, it's so cheap. And he's like, it's not cheap. And then they cut to the fake cartoon, and they're saving money because every time someone's talking, there's something covering their face. Or they're looking, or you see the back of their head. It's like, they're not even really, they're animating it this way because they can't afford to make the mouth move. And I thought that was such a joke until I actually worked on an animated series on this level. And I was like, oh yeah, we need to be really careful, because we, as writers, we overwrite sometimes, because we're so in love with our own words. I mean, I've done it. I mean, I'm not criticizing anybody. I mean, I'm guilty of that, like any writer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to show instead of say. A great example, or a bad one, and no disrespect to these creators, but many years ago there was a fantasy anime. I think it was called The Heroic Legend of Arslan or something
Mhm,
like that.
mhm.
Yes.
And there was a scene where they show one of the characters fighting, and then there's a voiceover. He's such a great fighter, and it's like, well, I see that. That line did not need to be there. And I always remembered that because I would watch it and I'm like, this takes me out of the entire process. Right. And so there were times when, especially during the table reads, even watching it now, completed, I'm thinking to myself, oh, wow, we could have not used dialogue there. We could have probably pulled that and it would have been just fine. But, you know, what they say, hindsight is 50, 50/50 or
I
whatever.
mean, they also say like with creative people, it just never ends. You never
Yeah.
stop editing. You never. It just like it never ends. And to your point, like it doesn't even stop at the script because I was watching up to. I directed a few of the episodes as well. So even when you get into directing and then you're talking to your storyboard artist, like
Mm-hmm.
part of the conversation is economy. Like that's one of the first things you have to talk about is how do we economize. So there was points even when you had something in the script and you had to slightly change it. For instance, like if you had a swarm of people running, right? Instead of going with a wide shot, right, you can go with a medium where you can hide their feet, right?
Yep.
That's a lot of money you're saving on animation, right? Like it's just little things here and there that don't, like Brandon said, it's not going to take you out of the story. It doesn't look gimmicky. And there's times where we even do stuff to economize that actually helps the story because sometimes like we've intentionally used still images
Mm.
um, to get a better emotional impact with score, as opposed to having like, and again, I'm not trying to spoil anything, but there's scenes where we wanted more emotional impact, and we decided that instead of having a bunch of animation or whatever, let's use still images and let's actually have people focus on the score and the sound design to really push the emotion there. So it's there's ways that you can economize, not necessarily just because you want to, but because it actually serves the story in a better way. And like I said, it never ends. Like I've gone into sessions where we're doing sound design and we're talking about music, and you're still having the conversation there about, okay, can we do things in a way where we don't have to have a full-blown orchestra here? You see what I'm saying? So, and that's the thing about animation, I think, even in this day and age, is that you have to be very smart with how you economize, because like Brandon said, you never want to push it to a point where the viewer is now calling those things out. Like, oh, wait, they were just trying to save money there. Oh, they wanted to say, like, you don't want that, right? So it's a very weird balance to try to manage.
It's like the end of Neo Genesis Evangelion. You know they ran out of money when they made the final episode, pissed everyone off.
25 and 26, yeah. The infamous 25 and 26.
Oh, yeah, no, it to me, it's one of those things with animation or just the creative process in general. If you have unlimited budget and you're never forced to make choices,
Mm.
I think you lose
That's fair.
creativity because it's
Yeah.
too easy. You never have to,
Yeah.
chew the cud,
That's a
if you
good
will.
point.
There's nothing forcing you to really focus
Mhm.
on the problem. Like, what is the actual best way other than
Mhm.
throwing heaps of money?
Mm-hmm. And I think,
And
Brandon, one example is that when we were trying to shorten some of the scripts,
Mm.
that was, it ended up making the story better because, like you said, we're able to take out, some stuff that originally felt good, but when we started looking at the animatics, they felt like too expositionary. So we're like cutting down on those things. And like you said, we were actually forced into making the story better in that way, as opposed to just, like you said, throwing more money at it as well. So that's a good point.
There was a great moment in episode, I believe it was 3, where we showed the pantheon of the gods and
Yeah.
or the divine ones. That's what they call the gods
That's
in
a
the
good
series.
point. Yeah, I know where
And
you're
I
going with this.
remember the conversations 2 years ago
Yeah.
about how we were going to show that. And I felt it was. I mean, I felt like why is this so different? But I understood all the sides. I know he's laughing because this was a very contentious. It was a very weird thing because I was like, this doesn't have to be complicated. But I felt where they landed on how to show that was
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant. And another thing I wanted to do, and this is something
and
I
it
had,
helped the story as well.
yeah, and one of the things I had suggested early on, and I was shocked that they really did it. I felt like we should have a map of Elu on the floor of their Senate,
But
of the
yeah,
Elu Messi, which is their Congress or whatever, right?
yeah,
And I felt like that's a constant visual reminder of the
Where
world,
we are.
where they are, little things like that we had to think about over and over again. And yeah, and then there's some great references to my favorite movies that come up a little bit later in season one. And when some people get it and some people won't, but people who know, they're gonna know where some of this stuff came from. It's an homage, as we
Yeah.
say. So we got a chance to do a lot of fun stuff without deviating, from anything. Particularly, we have a particular a tortoise friend who may will recognize, and I'm not going to say anything else, but our tortoise friend is very special.
Very special.
So yeah, so generally speaking, I just want to say, we had a lot of fun. I mean,
We
that's one
did.
thing I want to get to the core of.
We
We
did.
ate very well because I believe in feeding my staff the best food we can find, which is not always the case with a lot of rooms. There are people who will order you absolute garbage. And it's like they don't even think about it. It's like, no, you
Well,
don't have to spend a lot of money to eat well,
I
especially
mean,
in
that's
California.
the core tenet of filmmaking is
Mhm.
feed your crew. I mean, like
Right,
literally.
exactly.
I mean
Right.
that is like the very basic thing. If you feed your crew whatever their craft is, if you feed them well, you will get much better work and they'll be happy, much happier. Yeah.
You're not
Oh,
wrong.
I worked on a major studio movie where the food was not great. I ended up getting food poisoning from that caterer.
Good God.
The entire crew, the entire production complained about the food and compared it to other movies, even other movies that studio and director had made. That was a running theme anytime food came out or was
Oh my
brought up.
I'll tell you a funny food story. Just like I'm not going to say what show I was working on, but near the end of production, they ordered from Popeyes, and I'm not complaining, but you had to have had 50 to 75 boxes of fried chicken come into that studio lot, and I had never seen anything like it. And the funniest thing was it was literally a pyramid of fried chicken boxes in the break room, right? They arrived at like 2:30. By 2:45, it was gone, and most of us had not eaten. So the assistant director, I mean the AD, the first assistant AD, whatever, he goes in, and I had never heard such a profanity laced tirade about fried chicken because the Teamsters went in there and just destroyed it. Like they ate all of the fried chicken and biscuits. So we had to make another order of probably 500 pieces of chicken. So we went through 1,000 pieces of chicken and about but nobody complained because it was free Popeye.
Oh my
Yeah, yeah, I
goodness.
was gonna say my food story was literally the first set I was ever on. I had just moved to LA. I was an extra, and I went on a night shoot on a movie called Never Been Kissed.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And, that was right before I went into Fight Club, right? But, it was crazy because, I mean, I'd never been on a movie set before, like, in real life, and so, because I'm tall, they had me do a pass in front of the camera. It's a night shoot, we're at the stadium, and, and I'm the big dude that walks in front of the camera, and, so I got to hear kind of what was going on, and the food truck they brought for the nu for lunch was they brought sandwiches, like, bagged sandwiches. And I didn't know. I mean, I didn't, like I'm just a dude from Iowa. I had no idea that it was a big deal. But over half the extras walked. They literally got so upset they left. And Drew Barrymore had to run down onto the pitcher's mound and basically very kindly beg people not to leave and apologize for whatever producers thought it was
Wow.
okay to bring, yeah, bring basically bagged lunch, to a night shoot, which a lot of people were freezing cold, you
Right.
know? I
Yeah.
mean, it was and again, I had no idea why is everybody upset? I mean, I had no idea, and they're like, "Well, they need to be hot food, blah, blah, blah," you know? So, my favorite
Yep.
part about this story is literally, again, just ignorant kid from Iowa when Drew Barrymore came back up, and I was up, with the director and everybody. I was like, wow, I didn't know better. I just like, wow, that was like a really beautiful speech. You really, wow, that was so nice. And she's like, oh, you're so sweet, and she gave me a little peck on the cheek.
What?
So I got
Wow.
on the movie Never Been Kissed, my first set ever. I got a peck on the cheek, a kiss from Drew Barrymore. So I'm like, okay, I'm in Hollywood forever now. I like,
That's fun. That's cool.
No, that's when you retire. That's like a
I know.
Costanza
It did
moment.
not
I'm
go
out.
well
I'm
after
done.
that.
Good night.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
always say that after working on night shoots, I'll never write a night scene that I on a show. Like, and I'm not even kidding. Like, I don't like night shoots. I don't like night
Yeah.
shoots. And any show, if I
Oh,
ever do any live action, anything, everything is if it's nighttime, is going to be indoors, and we'll shoot during the day.
Oh
That's
my
it.
God,
yeah.
Silent
Oh
Hill was
man.
like 80% night shoot. It
Oh
was,
my God, that's
yeah.
was it 12 hours?
Freezing Toronto. Oh my God, I'm surprised they still have toes.
I think the worst is I helped some friends make a movie. It was set in summer, and in LA, that's generally never a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were shooting on the old set of the unit, like an old, Mexican town setting, historical, and something they had, like it's kind of countryside. There's no running water or electricity out there because it's out in the Angeles forest. Well, it rained. It was 34 degrees.
Oh no.
And everybody was troopers. We brought in tons of hot food, and I was shocked. Did not hear a single complaint from anyone on that production.
Wow.
And people at the catering just kept churning out hot food and hot drinks to pass around to people. And yeah, it makes a world of difference that I think. I find it funny we're here talking about adapting for animation, and we're talking about feeding your staff. But I think these are the little things that people rarely ever hear about or know is so important behind the scenes of what it does for morale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes people feel that they're being thought about, that they are being
Right.
considered. I mean, it's the small things that sometimes make the biggest difference. And that actually, I was going to ask, like, what was, so we're talking about small things, but what were some of the biggest challenges you guys faced in trying in the adapting process from, from comic book to now, a cartoon, amazing cartoon on TV?
I can answer that one word: time. It was a time we were battling time. I wish we had like the time stone from the Infinity Gauntlet.
Just
I mean, for me, it was time. I can't speak for Roy, but for me, when our scheduling got a little bit wacky, because it does, because you just do. I mean, sometimes I feel like sometimes people need to understand. This is what the challenge is: that fast does not equal good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes it's important to be fast, but to me, it's more important to be good, because you can make something fast and it hits the screen 2 years later and everybody hates it. So for me, it was just about time management, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, that's a good point, actually. I think for me, it's just this process teaches you patience. I'm, like I've waited literally my entire life for this moment, and there's been a lot that I've had to go through to get to this point. Some of the things have been very, very painful. I alluded to some of it at the beginning of the interview. But I think when this show finally got greenlit, almost like what 3.5 years, 4 years ago now. Yeah, actually crazy. It's 2025. So yeah, it's 4 years ago now. Actually 4.5. From that moment to this moment, this has been one of the most rewarding experiences. But I've never worked this hard in my life. And it's for two reasons. First of all, for me, anytime I do something, I give it everything. I don't know how to, and I think it's a good problem to have. When I believe in something, and this goes for everything, marriage, my kids, my friends, like, and my work. I give every single thing that I can, because I was taught by my parents to show up. If you believe in something, you need to show up. You need to do it right. You need to do it with integrity as well. But it's hard, carrying this dream for so long, and then when you finally start the process, just the painstaking, from the writer's room, then you're doing, the arts, then you're working with the studio, then you're getting stuff back, then you're going editing, the directing, like every single step, it just takes so long to produce animation. It takes so long. So I think for me, the hardest thing was learning how to be patient, and trust the process. And yeah, it was very difficult for me, just the waiting. Because like being, creating something is like, and I don't, no offense to any pregnant woman out there, it's like being pregnant with something, right? At some point you just I need to have this baby, right? You want people to see it, and like, yeah, so it's like there's been a huge relief in the last couple of weeks, like just having it out there, and just now people seeing what we've been working on for so long. But the day-to-day just grind of going through everything, which I'm very grateful for, because like I said, this was a very rewarding process. Sometimes just having patience is hard to be able to get to this point.
That's a great point, man. And I'm gonna wrap it up with these 2 points. Point number one, it is great having it out, because when you talk about something and you're excited about something that people don't see, they
Mm-hmm.
start to not, it feels like they start not believing you anymore. It's not out yet. And I'm like, no, I really did this. And they're like, oh, but but the other thing I
That's
wanted to
true.
say before we take off. So by the time this drops, we might be closer to the season finale. So with that being said, can you talk about where else this is going to play in the world? Because I
Yeah.
believe you have that information before we take off.
Yeah. So we have specifically in Africa, there's a distributor called Showmax, that has the rights to the show, and it's going to be airing in 44 countries in Africa. To me, it's one of the biggest wins, because a lot of times, right, you have these type of shows that are inspired by a certain culture, but sometimes the people that actually who are being, um, the culture that's being adapted, the people that live in those places don't get to watch it. And to me, that was very important for me from the get go. And I had this conversation with the producers that we need to not treat Africa like a step child, and they need to be part of the ride. So yes, there'll be 44 countries in Africa will get to see June 13th, and they're going to be able to binge it. So they would have all the episodes out, and then also in the UK, I believe Ireland and in Great Britain, it's going to be streaming on ITVX in the summer as well
Okay.
too. And the producers are working on all the different what they call regions and territories to be able to have this, in different parts of the world. There's certain things I can't say yet because obviously they're not being official, but trust me, producers are working hard to get Iyanu in every single aspect, every single corner of the globe for people to be able to check it out. So it's really exciting that it's not just here in North America, but all over the world, people are going to get a chance to appreciate the show.
Well, thank you. That's really good to hear.
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing because, I've been on the other side of conversations like this because there's literally millions of people that want to either create a graphic novel, their own TV show, they want to direct, they want to write, they want to basically be creative. And sometimes it can be very hard to listen to someone who has achieved that goal because you then start to wonder, not in a bad way, that, man, when is it going to be my time? I just want to encourage everybody out there that's listening that wants to do something similar. First of all, I want to let you know that it's possible. There was a video I was watching about Ryan Coogler was giving a speech. I can't remember where, and one of the advice that he gave was like, just go, go, go. Like a lot of times as creators, we spend so much time up here just thinking, what if, can I, will it work? Who is going to, support me if I fail, blah, blah, blah. I think one of the things that I have always been very fortunate is that I just go. I don't care if I fail. I don't like I'll deal with all the trauma, I'll deal with all of the crying, I'll deal with that later. But I've always been very focused on just going, and I want to encourage everybody out there, just go. Create that graphic novel, write that script, shoot that short film, work on that short animated, pitch, work on being, an actor, do your, whatever it is that you're trying to do, create music, just do it and put it out there. Do it and put it out there and repeat and repeat and repeat. Because I feel like more often than not, I'm not going to say every time, I feel like life will give you one chance. It will give you one chance. And the worst thing that you can do is not be prepared to take that opportunity. And for me, when that opportunity came, I took it with force because I had spent literally decades preparing for that moment. So you just never know who you're going to meet, when it's going to happen. But keep on doing, keep on reiterating, and hopefully one day your opportunity comes.
It's like the late great Bob Evans said, luck is when opportunity meets preparedness.
Correct. Yes.
Yep. No, that's a quote I've heard over the years that I've absolutely loved because, you can control your preparedness.
Mm-hmm.
You can't control your opportunities.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So do what you can do so that, you have the chance.
Yeah.
That's all we get is a chance.
Yeah.
Whether or not you take it, what you do with it,
that's up to you.
That's up to each of us individually.
Yeah.
Or who you've put together around you, who you're working with. Because I think that's part of preparation.
Yeah.
If anybody hasn't heard it, check out the story of, I believe, if I remember right, the guy's name was Roger Bannister. He was the first person to ever run a mile under 5 minutes.
Mm.
And that is a story of a guy who set out to do something that people told him would kill him, that it wasn't humanly possible. And he found a team of people who were willing to help him do it. Literally pace run him to keep him on track to do it. And so who you surround yourself with
That's a good point.
changes everything.
It does. It does. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Brilliant.
Yeah. I would say the perspective, you found some great people to, surround yourself with to get started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you got a bad artist or, other people who in your life are telling you, no, trying is the first step to failure.
Yeah.
No, trying is the first step to learning.
It is. Yeah.
As Picard told Data, you can do everything right and still fail. And that's okay because that's life. So long as you learn something from it.
Correct.
Yep.
And you can keep going with the right people around you.
Absolutely. Well said.
And occasionally you get a great win like this.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you guys.
Roye,
Thanks for
you
coming, man. We
here
really
with us.
appreciate having you here.
Oh, like I said, I knew this was going to be fun. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it. All right, guys.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you again so much for coming. This was really fantastic.
All right, take it easy, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Lefty Speaks, the official Vampire Hunter D podcast, hosted by Brandon Easton, Neal Fischer, and Scott McLean. This podcast is created by Unified Pictures and 9 Realms. Narration by Lauren Evallen-Muller. Recording and editing by 9 Realms. Produced by Scott McLean and Ian E. Muller. Based on the works created by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Happy hunting.